And welcome back to Loss of Down, brought to you by Abby Turner Creative, your one-stop shop marketing agency specializing in branding, high-end photography, fashion, and more. Especially if you're our age, where it feels like there's a wedding, baby pictures, college graduations, engagements, you name it, they're happening every weekend. Abby Turner Creative is the only way to go. Check her out for yourself at abbyturnerphoto.com. That's Abby, A-B-B-E-Y. We're on her Instagram, Sawdown and Sapphire. Again, that's abbyturnerphoto.com. Ladies and gentlemen, the week has finally come. Football is back. We have live training. We have live training camp on NFL Network. We got the Hall of Fame game, the Jets and the Brownies here on Thursday. And you know what? Even today, we have a nice little interview for you. We got to sit down with the man, Mr. Drew Davenport from the Auction Brief. Got to go over some players, situations to kind of keep your eye on as fantasy football starts. That is enough out of me, boys. How was your weekend? How excited are you about this week kicking off?
Drew was amazing. From the Auction Brief, as you said, great call, Steven. It was awesome to get him on. Steven caught that fish, so credit to him. Also, congratulations, boys, because we are officially in the best shape of our life season of the NFL calendar. Everybody, this is the time where all three of us, unfortunately for you, Steven, we get to welcome in our shitty teams with hope that the future will be better than the present. So I'm excited for that. This weekend, unfortunately, I was wanting to do the golf outing with you, Steven, on Saturday. Instead, my brother was not able to get off work. So my dad and I are going to the Hall of Fame induction for Ken Riley. It's only the second Bengal ever to get into the Hall of Fame. My dad was like, I got to be there for it. My brother's a Bengals fan, so I wanted him there, but he was unable to get off work, so I will be there in my Fred Biletnikoff jersey watching Ken Riley and a bunch of non-Raiders get into the Hall of Fame. Excited, but again, it's a reflection of where we're at.
Experience.
Exactly. So I hope you boys are doing well.
I'm doing great.
Good.
I got nothing else to say, man. Short and sweet. I got no news. This is the best kind of news.
And if you guys, for the record, when you get that, I'm great, check your calendars, because that's how you know it's the end of the month. David's been slaving his off. So that's why he's got, if you got video, that whiskey pours a little bit thicker than usual.
Yeah, it is.
Facts.
It's Monday. Oh, good thing it's at the end
Monday
of the quarter.
end of the month.
So, David and Steven, are you guys White Claw fans?
I'm not in love with them, but I'll drink them. Like,
exactly.
It's not my primary choice. I'll only drink them when it's summer and I'm on the boat or I'm like out in the sun. Like,
yeah, like an easy one to bring along to like a pool or something like that. Yeah.
Or if I'm hurting. If I'm hurting, that's a good way to kind of get the hair of the dog.
It's like fake alcohol.
I prefer high noons, though, to be honest.
I do like the high noons.
I've not had a high noon. I apologize.
Similar story, but
I think I kind of like the high noons more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really? Well, the only reason I brought this up is because I have been shamed mercilessly by my family in this past week for people at home. Passion fruit, yay or nay? Steven's face. I
never had it. I hate grapefruit, but I've never had the passion fruit.
Yeah, I'm the same. Like grapefruit, passion fruit, they tear me up. Like Elvis juice, one of the beers down here, I can't drink it. Like it physically makes me sick.
I was really hoping this was a safe place because I love grapefruit.
No, it's not. So now you just exposed yourself to everybody.
All right, so just kidding. I hate passion fruit and grapefruit now, even though they're both delicious and refreshing.
Hey, everyone's entitled to their opinion, even though it's wrong.
You know, that's fine. That's fine. Again, Drew's interview coming up. Make sure you listen to that. Otherwise, boys, let's get into some NFL news now. And just like last week, the running back saga, the debacle, it continues yet again. And let's start with this one. Saquon Barkley, who was on the franchise tag that pays running backs $10.1 million a year. He signed a deal 1 year for $11 million and $2 million in incentives. Now, here's the kicker for him. He can be eligible to be franchise tagged again next year. So he complained, like all the running backs, about the tag, and then he basically signed his tag and said, do it again next year. I dare you, Giants. So, Steven, you were very pro, let's help the running backs out. This can't be something that you were excited to see.
No, not at all. It's almost like I stuck my neck out for you, and this is what you do to me. I can't think of the movie that I was just quoting right there. Some football movie. Anyway, but yeah, it makes no sense. I mean, and you summed it up. I think all of our thoughts just right there. It's like you're on a potentially 1-year deal with the franchise tag, and now what you do is you sign a 1-year deal for a couple extra million incentive base, which is maybe that quote 1 to 2 million unquote that they were off on the original contract extension here before the deadline. So for the fact that now you're going to take a risk on yourself with just a little bit more money, but putting yourself in that same situation next year, it blows my mind. And I guarantee you, not if, when Saquon does get hurt, this is going to come back and bite him in the ass, because now he's going to think to himself, man, I really should have taken that contract, even though they're just a mill or two off, and I could have had longevity. Because at the end of the day, yeah, running backs, it's becoming more prevalent with them kind of holding out a little bit. But players do this to make sure that they can have the financial security if they go down injured. Always the first person that comes to my mind, Earl Thomas flipping the bird over to the Seahawks sideline after he comes back. And these front offices just kind of hold these players hostage to, but you need to play because you're teammates. Don't you love your teammates? I do, but I also like my money. I want to make sure I'm taken care of. And from Saquon's point of view, you can't bet on yourself. Based off your history in the NFL, that is the last thing that you want to do. You should have taken the contract 2 weeks ago. 1 and 2 mil off. Get it in endorsement, Saquon. My goodness. Horrible move on his part and his agent's part.
I just don't. I agree. It's one of the dumber deals in history from a media perspective. But there has to be some wins for him somewhere in that fine print that's just not being reported. There's got to be something different, right? I don't have to show up. I don't have to practice all but twice a week. I don't have to, there's got to be something in the fine print that makes it different and actually better, and not just $500,000 better than what the tag would have been or whatever. I don't understand it at all. It's just really, and it transitions well right into Jonathan Taylor, who just went out and asked for $16 million to Ursay, who told him to kick rocks. But I don't get the Saquon Barkley deal. It doesn't help running backs at all. But then it also, we can move and we can talk about Jonathan Taylor. And, I don't know how that psychopath sees the Barkley deal and walks into Ursay's office, literally, and goes, I want 16 per year, an extension now, on a year coming off of injuries where he didn't do that well. He's 2 years out of an elite season. Every running back is the most they can sniff is $11 million right now. And I don't get where these ludicrous demands, where these stupid deals, where this shit comes from. It just doesn't, none of it makes sense to me. Go out, if you really want to get paid as a running back, go out, because this is the best way to get paid over time right now, is if you're Saquon Barkley, ask for a 6-year deal, fully guaranteed, where you're getting paid $6.5 per year. Fully guaranteed. You want to see more money, fully guaranteed. You want to see more money over time. Go at it that way. Sure, it's not big and shiny, it's not 16 per, but you'll probably end up with more money over time, to be frank. It sucks for running backs. We said it last week. I don't get a lot of this right now.
Travis Etienne said this week, and he reached out, basically said, hey, you know what? It's not going to happen for your traditional old school. I'm going to run it down your throat, the Ezekiel Elliott style running back. There's a reason why Zeke is fighting to get $3 or $4 million right now. ETM understands you got to take the CMC route. You got to take that. I guess even Saquon Barkley, be dual threat. You got to be beyond that if you're going to get paid more. Even guys like Le'Veon Bell, who weren't always guaranteed it, you need to find that right spot. And I mean, I guess if you're Jonathan Taylor, you're probably fired up that Jim Irsay has decided to come out and go on this scorched earth anti-running back tangent, because it's doing nothing but win people over for the running backs right now. It's just, and here's the thing, it's not even like Jim Irsay said anything that is false. The problem is that
it's Jim Irsay.
It's Jim Irsay, first of all.
And he sounds wasted anytime he talks. He's just where's the credibility with this guy?
Well, if I died tomorrow and he wasn't here in the league, and they're like, all right, well, maybe we don't go that route. Uncomfortable truths are sometimes left like under the skin, like you know it, don't say it. People know running backs should get paid more. It's just you can't because there's too many people coming in. Leave it at that. Instead, now you're in a situation where Zach Moss breaks his arm. What do, Steven? Like, do you have to pay Jonathan Taylor? Because now you have Anthony Richardson, who's about to go out there and play with who? The names that you had on that team right now. I mean, God, I had it written down. I don't even remember these running backs. Evan Hall, the rookie, 5th-round pick from Northwestern, Jake Funk, and Deion Jackson. Those are your options? What do you do, Steven?
At least Deion Jackson has some touches in an NFL game. But no, I know we were kind of talking about it a little bit earlier. I think JT is like that anomaly that can really – that the ball is in his court because you said it right there. Zach Moss just broke his arm. Don't forget that they also traded Naheem Hines at the trade deadline last year, and he was a stud for them in the backfield, in the receiving game, whatever it may be. Talk about a dude who was getting underpaid. I think for what he was putting on in Indy is wild. But then you also have the fact that single-handedly, to David's point, that elite year a couple years ago, he single-handedly almost brought them to the playoffs. I wouldn't say he single-handedly was the bright spot in that offense last year, but name me someone else who was. Right? Yeah, I know he missed some game, 6 games with a high ankle sprain. I mean, he still put up just a little bit under 900 yards at a 4.5 yards per carry. I mean, he truly is that offense because we know it wasn't Matt Ryan that was really running that offense to the fullest, right? So I think when it comes to Jonathan Taylor, he has a lot to be able to put pressure on this Indianapolis Colts front office. I don't think that he should be paid $16 million. I think that's a little bit ridiculous. But after seeing Saquon, you can definitely start pushing for the $10 million a year, right? I think 12 might be the cap here, and that might be asking too much. But if any running back can try to pull that strictly because of the situation that they're currently in, I think it's going to be JT.
Rebuttal for you, Steven, and I want your thoughts. Just because here is a list of next year's free agent running backs. Other than Jonathan Taylor, you will have Saquon Barkley, who you'd imagine will probably get tagged again. Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler, Josh Jacobs, J.K. Dobbins, Tony Pollard, and A.J. Dillon. You said the ball is in his court, which I don't necessarily even disagree with because of how desperate their situation is right now. But we also saw last year, I know he was hurt a lot, but high sample size. It was still 192 carries. Lowest average per rush in his career by a half a yard. And don't forget, this is a guy that was in the Wisconsin running room where all they do at Wisconsin is run the ball 25 times a game against New Mexico. Like, that's what you're doing. So, like, how much is the ball really in his court where the Colts can just say, hey, if you leave, we're going to suck this year, live with it, and hopefully next year we'll draft somebody again.
Well, hindsight's 20/20, right? You know, we know what Saquon can be, right? Derrick Henry, well, he's going to be like 31 at that point in his career. He's a bruiser. Talk about
he's that young? Holy hell. Derrick Henry feels like I think he's 55.
Yeah, I know, but he's just been dominant since his second year in. At least he's been notable his second year in, just been dominant since his third year in.
Absolutely.
Austin Eckler, these are all going to be really dependent on the seasons. Tony Pollard's coming off an injury. Let's see what he's going to look like, right? Let's see what Josh Jacobs' situation even is going to look like if he does end up playing. We all know that most of these players are going to end up playing. A.J. Dillon's a huge question mark. That's somebody who's splitting carries. Did not come off a really strong year this previous year, so we'll see what they're going to use in that offense. But I could still make an argument that the ball is in his court. It's like, oh, you're going to hit Saquon? He's had 4 times the injuries as me. Derrick Henry, he's older, way more workload. Austin Eckler, you could, but do you really want to start paying a 30-year-old running back who can do both? Yes, but Josh Jacobs, okay. Let's throw him in the back pocket. J.K. Dobbins, yeah, right. This kid can't stay in the field, and he's made his name. He's made his name in the NFL for all the wrong reasons right now, I feel like. And then Tony Pollard, injuries. A.J. Dillon, huge question mark with splitting the carries. So it's.
But isn't that part of the problem? Is that all these guys are the best running backs, and they all have giant red flags. It's where it's like it sucks, but I've almost come to the point where I get where David's coming from with the, hey, take a 6 years, $36 million deal, guarantee yourself money for a long time versus, I mean, Jonathan Taylor, $16 million a year. Jim Irsay could cut him tomorrow, and 32 teams could have the option. Nobody would even come close.
No. And they just...
It's frustrating.
But also, not every team are like the Colts, and they're like in that desperation. We need an offensive star. And are you willing to take that risk with Anthony Richardson? Yes, the stories and everything coming out of camp have been glowing reviews of Anthony Richardson. Like, if he's not, then you're going to sit there and be like, man, we could have had Jonathan Taylor. Yes, the offense that doesn't kind of run anymore in the NFL, but Jonathan Taylor is just, he was just a freak 2 years ago, and you're praying and paying for that to repeat.
Well, that's what makes it even further, and that's what makes the insanity go even further. Is if Jonathan Taylor was coming off his second year in a row of 1,000+ yards, 12+ touchdowns, there's an argument there. There's an argument where he could get $12 million a year. But like the same argument I make for Josh Jacobs is you've been in the league for 5 years. I've seen 1 year where you were elite. You know, like JT, you've been in the league for 3 years. There's been 1 year where you were elite. Like, put up another year, then have the discussion. It's hard for me to want to pay a guy who you've only seen 1 year of and 1 good year of. And I know he's probably great and he'll put up another year, but like
he will. I mean, he's good if he plays. Yeah, he's good enough. Right. He will.
But like, what if he gets hurt again? Then we're in a real predicament as a franchise if we just paid a guy $16 million to be, constantly hurt, to be who is it? DeAndre Swift, who everyone is so high on, but he can't stay on the field. It's like that. You don't want to lock up cap and a guy who's not available. And so these guys who are 1 year wonders, like, and Josh Jacobs, I'm going to call a 1 year wonder because, again, we watched him run into a brick wall for 3 years, and then all of a sudden he was the top running back in the NFL for a quick moment.
He was ridiculous last year.
Yeah,
I'm with you there.
Right. So, like, it's just, why would I lock up cap in that before I see some consistency? So, like, the guys who have been paid, the Derrick Henrys, the Nick Chubbs, the CMCs, all have shown multiple years of greatness consecutively. And sure, you have CMC who got hurt for 2 years in between that, but outside of that has been elite. So, like, show me some constant productivity and some non-injury years put together, and then let's talk about bigger contracts.
And don't foreshadow what we're going to talk about later, but that's just not the way the NFL is going. You need to give me 6 games, and yep, here's a $100 million contract. And it's wild. I know.
802 career receiving yards. Not doing himself any favors there either. But Aaron Rodgers. Steven, are you in the mental headspace to receive some news that might hurt you? Because this week
I am
he
now.
took a $35 million pay cut, which opens up about $9 million this year, just this year. And it sounds like Rodgers has indicated his goal to basically play 2 seasons with the team. Steven, this is your darling. I have a question for you, and I'm going to throw it to you. But doesn't this feel like increasingly, like it's almost like an attack on Packers fans, and you being one of them, where I just don't understand. This fan base has revered and done nothing but defend this man for years and years and years. Did it ever even feel like there was a shot that he would take a discount to help the Packers win a championship? Because it feels like he's taking it out on the Packers right now instead of like trying to win for the Giants. It can be both, but it feels like an attack on you Packer fans.
And the worst part about this is it's an attack on 3-4 guys in the front office, mainly at Brian Gutekunst, right?
Exactly, 3 guys.
And for the rest of us, the rest of the 550,000 shareholders and the rest of Green Bay and the rest of Packer Nation is just we're just sitting here enjoying our NFL training camp live and just getting hit with strays. And it's ridiculous. And that's the thing. It's like, Aaron, and I'm one of those Packer fans who defended him, right? But Aaron, just leave us out of your mouth. Like, we haven't 98% of Packers haven't done anything to you, and you're worried about literally the 2%. Like, and I understand. You got your money. But here's Aaron Rodgers' cap hit percentage of the salary cap that he's had in Green Bay since 2014. 12.4, 12.1, 11.8, 11.6, 11.3, 14.9, 13.2. Where's he at with the Jets? After this, he will be 3.9% this year.
No way.
6.7% next year. And if he stays a third year, 8.3. So he's not even sniffing double digits, where every year since 2014, he's at least taken up 11.5% of the cap, which is wild. So not only that, he could have done something in Green Bay where we've had plenty of stars. Maybe, I don't know, maybe all those people that he listed off that he was upset that they had to cut or they released, maybe they would have been able to stay if you had that money. Although all these free agents that Green Bay is not a great destination, they want to come play with me. Then why do we never really hear any of those names? How come we never really saw anything serious coming down? Why didn't you really recruit and take a pay cut to make sure those players can come play? Because I can make an argument that up until this point, that Green Bay was a more favorable place to go play than New York Jets in MetLife Stadium. Out of all the things, yes, New York over Green Bay, I'm not making that argument. Sorry. New Jersey over Green Bay, I'm still really not making that argument.
Fuck New Jersey, though.
Fuck New Jersey,
Facts.
though. But the sheer fact that you're going to New York and now all these people want to play with you, they would have played with you in Green Bay. You're going to tell me that people who didn't want to compete with, at that point, the best quarterback in the NFL to win championships in arguably the weakest division outside of the East or the South in any given year, and an extremely weak conference, that they wouldn't come play with you because it was too cold and there's nothing to do in Green Bay, Wisconsin? But now all of a sudden, people want to start playing with you when you're under 5% of the salary cap? Absolutely, Aaron Rodgers. It's just hilarious to me that it comes down to this, and I really want to. I don't want to be one of those guys that's just like, fuck Aaron Rodgers.
You
everything
want
that
to
he's
be able
doing,
to root for him, right?
and he's just making it impossible for me to
Yeah.
root for him. Like, it's getting to that point where I want to see you throw an interception to the New Orleans Saints in triple coverage in the NFC Championship game, AFC Championship game, whoever that equivalent is. But now at that point, how can I root for him? Like, give me, like, in 5-10 years, like, that's my guy. Right?
Yes.
Longevity,
it's just like
that's my
he's
guy.
hurt himself right. Now, here's David, I'm sorry. You are going to be given a talk. I know you hate Aaron Rodgers. You deserve to be able to talk about him. But, Steven, in a world where if he stays 2 years, this is a loaded roster. In the event that he wins a Super Bowl with the Jets, I have two questions for you. One is, like, what does that do? Like, does that do anything for Packer fans from your perspective? And then the other is, there's literally no way in hell that Aaron Rodgers would ever consider going into the Jets or the Hall of Fame as a Jet if they won a Super Bowl, right? There's no chance he could do that.
No, I don't think there's.
He's weird enough where I could have.
I know, and we're also on the eve, or a few days ago, when Tyreek came out, that story that he's already said he's going to retire as a Dolphin as opposed to a Chief, which is wild, a wild story in itself. Outside of him winning back-to-back MVPs and 2 Super Bowls in 2 years, like, even then, that's a stretch.
So, it's like you can't go in as a Jet.
No, that'd be so disrespectful. But if they end up winning, it really depends, because those Packers fans, I mean, how many people are leaving Green Bay if they're growing up there? Not too many. So that kind of equates to closed-mindedness, which equates to just a lot of aggression that's unwarranted, which means that they're going to hate Aaron Rodgers for like a longer time than I would. So I know, like, I have the feeling in Green Bay that not a lot of people would be happy. But again, it's like, if I'm sitting there and it's a good matchup, depending how the rest of the season goes, and I've said this too, depending on the shots that he takes, I might change. And now I'm kind of going back to, or I'm favoring.
I truly feel bad for you guys.
It's ridiculous. But I think as the season progresses, it really depends. I think I'm just going to be a bandwagon guy to have full transparency.
Welcome.
Fuck this dude. Shit, they got the 2 seed. It's the Jets' time, baby. Trade in my green for another green.
You're going mean green. David, I have to open it up to you. You hate Aaron Rodgers. I know you're not going to say a single positive word here. But what were your thoughts? Go off, King.
On the surface, on the very surface, it appears that after years of being a self-centered fucking dickhead, that Aaron Rodgers has come to New York and suddenly decided to be a good guy for a change.
Don't you feel bad?
He's pulling a paragraph out of the Tom Brady book of how to fucking help your team win. And he's taking the largest pay cut in history, even though he's still being paid like a Roman king, so that he can let the Jets go out, collect more talent, and it's a great move for both parties, right? However, if you move past the surface, he's still a self-centered dickhead because all he is looking at these next 2 years and he's recollecting with himself that this is my last 2 years in the NFL, and if I don't win a Super Bowl, there's a chance I might not be a first ballot Hall of Famer. And he probably will be. But like, he's thinking that though. He's won Super Bowl. That's probably the most shit he'll take his whole life is the constant like, what, you didn't do more with the Green Bay, blah 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 blah. But like, he's itching for that second one, and that solidifies his legacy. We all saw the eye test. We all think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer, but you go to the stats, and because he got a later start to his career, because whatever it is, there's some argument that he might be like second ballot, maybe not first. And in his own head, that's where he's at, and he's doing this for self-centered reasons, which is I need a Super Bowl to solidify my legacy as one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever do it. And he watched Tom Brady go do it in Tampa Bay, where he gets his Super Bowl. That solidifies Tom Brady as the greatest quarterback to ever play the game. This is all underneath the surface. It's all self-centered. He's just a fucking prick. There is nothing good about him. And I hope he tears his ACL at the start of both seasons.
We got the
Send it. Send it. I hate that man. We talk about him so much. I hate that man.
But here, I was going to say, like,
wow.
Solidify.
You never wish that on anybody.
Yeah, I'm with you, Steven. See, solidify.
No, fuck that. Send Aaron Rodgers to the fucking injury list for 2 consecutive years into retirement. He doesn't deserve the Super Bowl. He doesn't deserve shit.
I'm with you. He is a
self-centered. I don't actually wish the ACL tear, but
it's on record. That's better.
But it's on record. It's on record. But like,
God,
just so we're
you're
clear,
kind of a pussy for walking. Just so
we're clear. Would I feel bad about it? Absolutely not. Send that fucking douchebag.
But you're there watching.
Send that douchebag out to pasture, and let's talk about other things in the news other than this fucking guy.
Okay, Steven, it's your boy. I'm gonna let you talk.
No, and I don't even know what's worse. There's one. He has that. You know my thoughts on LeBron. This is where he is very LeBron-esque. I, me, we, I, me. Like, and it blows my mind. And while watching NFL Training Camp Live, this is from Saturday after the whole "keep my coach's name out of your mouth" directed at Sean Payton. He goes on to say, this is not a direct quote. I know. This is not a direct quote, but I'm not misleading you by saying the quote incorrectly. But essentially what he says is they're talking about the contract, how he's saving their contract restructure. Right, and it's like, yeah, well, Green Bay obviously, helped me out financially down the road, so I'm very thankful to them. And they continue on the conversation. It's like, just stop, dude. We get it. Green Bay fucked you one time because Brian Gutekunst didn't want to do anything. You fucking hold the front office hostage. You take this fat fucking contract. Devontae Adams goes because you, Aaron Rodgers, would not make up your mind on top of Brian Gutekunst kind of undercutting him a lot, which is wild. But it's just wild. There's like this hatred triangle I have between me, Brian Gutekunst, and Aaron Rodgers. And it's oh my God.
Fitting you have the Hall of Fame hat on right now while talking.
Yeah, very fitting. Very fitting.
All right, well, speaking of a potential future Hall of Famer too, Jalen Ramsey with the Miami Dolphins. He's actually out now until December with his camp knee injury. He underwent a full meniscus repair. And the Dolphins, in reaction to that, signed Eli Apple, who is still somehow only 27. When I saw that, my brain was
Derrick
like,
Henry are the same age in my mind.
yeah, I know. Derrick Henry, I just Googled when you were talking, he's 29. I'm like, there's no way he's younger than us. There's no chance in hell he's younger than us, and it made me sad about myself. But what I will say is that Jalen Ramsey had a great point the other day when he tweeted out that end of season push gonna be legendary, because he's right. If this Finns team is able to hang around, they have an ace in their pocket for the postseason. And I know people have been shitting on Eli Apple too, because it's fun and he talks too much and he's very annoying. But his play itself is fine, and you give that he actually is going to be there after he's back too. It's an added asset with like a ton of experience in the playoffs too. They have Xavier Howard. They've got the South Carolina rookie Cam Smith, and then again Eli Apple back to add on. You think about how their pass rush is going to be fun this year. Kristen Wilkins, Bradley Chubb, Emmanuel Ogbah, Jalen Phillips. If this team can just keep its head above water, perhaps this could be one of those weird blessings where you get a super healthy, super energized Jalen Ramsey coming in for the playoff push in December. You guys are thinking, you sniffing the roses like I am, or are you a little bummed out about this news?
Absolutely. I think it's a huge loss for the Dolphins defense immediately, but they're still one of the top defenses on paper in the NFL. You got Fangio, who, in my opinion, still a great defensive mind. You've got a really good front seven in pass rush. I think they'll miss Ramsey against better teams, but I also think if they play their cards right, like we're talking about, Ramsey comes back in December and you elevate a great defense going into the playoffs, and suddenly you've got two elite corners, and you've got a great third option in Eli Apple, and who knows what Cam Smith will be. Maybe he's even better, right? So, like, it's a scary secondary on paper, especially when Ramsey comes back. They definitely are going to miss him early on. And again, they're probably only going to miss him against great teams, because Xavier Howard's no slouch. He's no slouch. He's a phenomenal corner. He was hurt a little bit last year, which is why his numbers weren't as good as they have been. But if he stays healthy, they've got a number one corner still. They're not going to be in a horrific position. But man, when they get Ramsey back, that's going to be, you got two lockdown corners on both outsides, and you've got a proven veteran in Eli Apple that is going to lock down any third receiver in an offense.
The best thing that came out of this, yeah, it's in December, so it's not season ending. We can check that. But you're also still going to have a Jets and a Bills game here late in the season. So you don't have to play a divisional opponent, that divisional opponent, twice without Jalen Ramsey. When you think of Stephon Diggs, you think of your Garrett Wilsons. Just to be able to have Ramsey on him and then have Xavier Howard just do whatever he wants, that's when that defense is really going to be unlocked. But I think it's just a gut punch. I completely agree with David as somebody who got to witness and somewhat be terrorized by Vic Fangio's defense for years in Chicago. And not to mention I would give him all the credit, maybe 85% of the credit of what the Denver Broncos defense is looking like right now.
I was going to say, you and I both have been in hell with him for years.
Yeah, and it wasn't, we could definitely say Nathaniel Hackett wasn't the reason for that defense. So I agree. That front seven in itself is really going to cause.
Rodgers, by the way.
Yeah. So that front seven itself is going to cause some problems. Yeah, with being able to have Xavier Howard back there, I think he kind of took a step back a little bit. But all in all, I just think that whole side of the ball last year didn't live up to the hype. But to your question to leading into this, I absolutely think the Dolphins can keep their head above water, because they proved it that they can keep their head somewhat above water when they were missing the most important position on the field, and that's with Tua being out with the multiple concussions throughout the year, and Skylar Thompson leading for a win or two.
They were also without some defensive players, though, too. Some key defensive secondary, too, while they were without Tua.
Well,
so you're
wasn't Byron
100%
Jones
right.
out, too? And,
yeah.
Didn't even bring in Bradley Chubb until week 10 or whatever. Or what?
Exactly. So now you're going to get a full offseason with that. And Christian Wilkins is I hate saying most underrated because I keep feeling we're saying the most underrated defensive lineman. They all keep getting paid. But the most underrated defensive lineman who has yet to get that second contract, Christian Wilkins, I think is going to be at the top of that list.
Agreed.
He's a stud, and he's the funniest player in the NFL, I would argue. If you've ever heard him mic'd up.
Quinnen Williams might be my guy, man. I don't know.
Have you heard him mic'd up, though, Christian Wilkins?
Well, what we're
Christian
realizing
Wilkins
here,
mic'd up is hilarious.
He is
defensive
a legend.
tackles might be the funniest position in sports. They're hilarious.
There's only I would agree, but there's only one thing funnier than all of them combined, and it was when Andrew Luck was mic'd up, and he would just get absolutely wrecked and be like,
"Oh, great hit, man!
Good hit,
Great
yeah,
job, man.
that was awesome."
Oh, hell of a rush.
How about Chad Ochocinco / Johnson? When he was mic'd up, that guy was hilariously good.
That's a different breed. That's a whole different world.
When he got hit by like Ray Lewis, it was one of those things.
Dude, that was so good. It's like, man, I just tried to blindside Ray Lewis. It still didn't work.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, his funniest moments were him talking to the coach is like, I thought I could do it. Like I thought I had
the
Ray.
referee like right after a play, like, oh, that didn't work.
We need Chad Ochocinco. We need you on the pod, bud.
Oh my God, I'd love Chad Ochocinco. That's a bucket list guy.
Oh, that's a white whale.
That's a white whale.
If any NFL player, current or retired, would do it, it would be Chad Ochocinco.
Well, yeah, because it'd just be like, oh, nobody will listen.
Sorry, she's going hammer. I couldn't even put that on mute. She was just going to town.
No, you're fine. Because, Steven, we want to remind you guys that Drew Davenport's interview is brought to you by Abby Turner Creative, your one-shop-stop marketing agency specializing in branding, high-end photography, fashion, and more, especially if you're around our age where there's college graduations, engagements, weddings, and baby pictures. You name it. Feels like they're happening every weekend. Abby Turner Creative is the only way to go. Make sure you check her out for yourself at abbyturnerphoto.com. That's Abby, Abbey, or on our Instagram page at Sawdat in Sapphire. Again, abbyturnerphoto.com. Drew Davenport, everybody. It was an awesome interview. Guys, I know you had as much fun as I did. If you're an auction draft guy, if you're a fantasy football guy in general, or legal advice, this is the guy you want to listen to. Steven, want to give us the guys' podcast again for the people at home?
The Auction Brief. Like Wally said, he's got, 20-plus years of criminal defense experience in his back pocket. This is just his side job. He is in love with auction fantasy football, which you can't hate because last year was my first year doing an auction. So now getting into Drew, I'm listening a lot. This is helping me a lot because I spent 86 of my $140 on running back, so I got screwed really quickly. So this is going to help me this year.
Awesome. We'll throw it over now. Drew, hopefully you can help Steven next year.
Today we have the pleasure of hosting the remarkable guest who brings an impressive combination of legal expertise and passion for auction-style fantasy football teams. You guys can catch him as the host of the Auction Brief podcast. Joining us is none other than Mr. Drew Davenport. Drew, it is awesome having you here. Thank you so much for taking time out of your outrageous schedule to be with us, man. How you doing tonight?
Hey, no problem. I always love an invite. I love talking to people that I've never talked to before, so it's really fun to meet you guys. And hey, this is what we're here for, right? This is what we live for. This is the 6 weeks of the year that it's our time to shine. Of course, the regular season is a different story, but it is great to be here. Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. I mean, you're talking to a Packers fan. We got a Browns fan and a Raiders fan. This is our season right now. Well, I'm newly coming in, so I don't want to take everyone.
Exactly. You don't get to be the whole I'm miserable all the time guy yet.
Yeah, you gotta wait another 15 years for that.
Yes, sir.
I didn't know that Greg Dulcich was going to be interviewing me. So.
I'll take that. Hey, I'll take that. It's better than Jason Momoa or Steven Adams, but I'll take Dulcich. That's not a problem. But no, you said it. Training camps are on the way, which means fantasy football is here. So we're going to pick Drew's brain about a couple player outlooks, some teams and new situations, what players to keep an eye on, some to stay away from. Gentlemen, are we ready to dive in a little bit?
Absolutely. First of all, Drew, thanks again for coming on. You're the man. And Steven and you guys just had a bonding moment with your records behind you. So mojo's high going into this. So thanks again, Drew.
There you go. The mojo's rising. Come on, you missed that. It was
right
there in front of you.
I feel it.
So we want to dive in with his legal expertise first. wide receiver from Minnesota Vikings, Mr. Jordan Addison, got arrested here, going 140 miles per hour. And it came out a couple days later that the reason behind that was because of a medical emergency of a sick dog that was in the car. I saw you kind of tweeting out over the last few days about that, kind of chuckling, having some side stories. With your experience in the legal criminal defense, you have to have some funny stories that are somewhat relatable to this, right?
I do. I have a million of them. Of course, I can't talk about current clients, but I tell you, right out of law school, I had a guy who got pulled over for a DUI and then told the officer that he could do the moonwalk instead of walking the line. He could do the moonwalk instead. So I got a million stories. But as it relates to this, Addison's excuse is pretty interesting because, like I said, I was very clear on Twitter. I'm not calling this guy a liar. Maybe there was a problem. I'm not sure that anything justifies driving 140 on a public roadway, though, because you're not a race car driver. You don't know how to handle a car at high speeds. I don't think okay, you're driving 90, you're whatever. I would consider something a little bit less to be more reasonable. I also want a quick point of clarification. When I hear the term arrested, I want to just be clear. He was not arrested. He was cited and released. And there is a difference because last year, Marquise Brown, when he got his ticket for 126 and a 65, he was actually arrested. And the reason it came back to matter was he ended up pleading to something, and then they fined him, and then they forgave the fine because of the incarceration time. But that also plays into a little bit about what the trooper thought about Addison when he had the contact with him. Because if Addison had been a jerk or had been, somebody that he felt was, it was necessary to arrest him, that would have said a little bit more about the seriousness of the crime to actually put him in jail.
So that's actually kind of an indicator that the officer could have potentially thought that this was true, or that he had at least a sensible reason to try to go faster than normal.
Yes, and the joke I made was, hey, look, if I had $1 for every time somebody told me they had an emergency when they shouldn't have been driving or they were committing a traffic offense, I'd be retired already. And this happens a lot. I get cases, so a large part of my docket, maybe half of my docket, I do misdemeanor work in Ohio. And about half of my docket is driving cases. So either DUI or hit and run or driving without a license. And you'd be surprised how often I hear they got a charge for driving without a license and they say, I was just fixing the brakes and I had to drive it around the corner to test it. Or I fixed the spark plugs. I had to start it up and move it out of the driveway. And it's like, wow, there are so many do-it-yourself mechanics in this town. Holy cow. So, but at a certain point that they're just making it up. I don't know if Addison's making it up. I'm not saying that. Certainly not going to open myself up to a defamation claim. But let's wait. Let's wait until we know a little bit more. But you're absolutely right to infer that maybe the officer at the scene thought the guy was trustworthy, thought he wasn't. Maybe it wasn't necessary to arrest him because it is a charge that carries up to maximum 90 days in jail. So he had the right to arrest him if he wanted to.
All right.
Crazy.
Well, I'll jump in here because you are an auction draft specialist. And that's a lot of people at home, at least our listeners, that might be new like myself. So I want to ask you an auction draft question for a newbie, someone who's not done this before. And I guess, should my advice, or the advice be to me to go after the very high-end talent and try to fill in after? Or are you more of a make your team really deep and ignore the Patrick Mahomes and the Tyreek Hills and stuff like that of the world?
So I found that my best builds come when I ignore the top 1 to 3 guys at the position. So typically I'm not going to have Christian McCaffrey. I'm not going to have Austin Eckler. I'm not going to have Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson. I don't like my builds when that happens. Now I will say that I believe there's a sliding scale. So the smaller the league is, the more you should go stars and scrubs. So the more you should be sinking the money into the top level guys. So I will try to differentiate a little bit when I get to the smaller leagues. And I mean by differentiate, I mean it is a big deal to have Travis Kelce in a 10-teamer, and it's a big deal to have a Jalen Hurts in a 10-teamer versus a 14-teamer. I'm really going to try to make a flatter build, make my team deeper. So I feel like I walked all around it there, but if you're straight up the middle and you're in a 12-team league, I think what you want to do is you really want to focus on tiers like 2 and 3. So you want to be looking at guys like A.J. Brown, Tony Pollard, those guys in that range right there. That's who I want to target as my number 1. And if I don't land them, then I'm going to really crush tier 3 for 2 or 3 guys. So, and that's what I like to do is go at wide receiver real heavy, and I want to end up with 3 guys that may be all first 3 round picks. So guys like maybe even C.D. Lamb might sneak into there for a value, but your A.J. Browns, your the guys that are going in that range, your Jalen Waddle, stuff like that. I want to get 3 of those guys, and that's really where I'm going hard. And then I'm kind of dump out of RB2 and spend my money on 1 good running back from tier 2 or 3, and just crush wide receiver.
I like it.
And that's perfect for the question I had. With the state of the running backs right now, who are really your most trustworthy guys maybe in that RB2 position that you're looking at? For somebody who last year in an auction draft, I'm an idiot, blew my load on 2 running backs to start off the draft, and I basically got screwed the rest of it. But what are your strategies usually looking like around that, especially with this year at running back?
Yeah, so at running back, it's hard to say like who do I feel like is safe, because that is a really loaded question because the position is so volatile. I will say that right at the top of the draft board, Bijan Robinson, I always go for youth at running back, no matter what. And that's a tiebreaker for me. So Bijan Robinson, although I'm not a guy who really loves, I'm sorry, I think I'm stepping on your show sheet here, but Bijan Robinson's not a guy who I really think to myself, hey, this guy's got RB1 written all over him as far as like top of the position. But I do feel safe with him because of the volume and because of the offensive line and because of how young he is. So that's the kind of thing that I like to do. I'm not really excited about, I know that like say Aaron Jones is a guy that is, people are feeling is like, okay, hey, he's a good value now because he's dropped a couple rounds, but he's 29. They may have an offense that takes a step back. I don't know if they will or not. Rodgers wasn't good for part of the year last year with the thumb, and they had some difficulties, so maybe they'll be okay. But I feel like that you're asking for there to be so many hurdles to overcome for him to succeed that I'd rather not have that. So I'd be looking at a guy who's a little bit younger and who has the chance, like a Zach Charbonnet. Is not somebody that's that exciting for people, but he's young. He's probably going to get 150 touches right out of the gate. And if he looks real good, maybe a lot of those are receptions, because I don't think that's Ken Walker's game. So that's the kind of thing I'm looking at.
That's awesome. You've just added somebody to my list of people to watch. But so kind of transitioning, still talking about running backs a little bit. I'm thinking about Anthony Richardson to the Colts this year. How does that affect somebody like Jonathan Taylor? Like, what should we expect from him? What should we expect from Michael Pittman Jr. now that you're seeing a rookie quarterback who uses his legs a lot to make plays come into the Colts system?
It's frustrating because Michael Pittman was really set up to take a step forward, and I don't think that's going to happen this year. My frustration is in large part, too, because of what happened with Josh Allen. Like, I think this is going to be on my headstone. Like, it was an outlier. Like, it's just, Josh Allen is a living outlier. Guys don't come into the NFL with a 55% completion percentage and suddenly make these huge leaps. He had a fantastic coach and a fantastic situation that they created for him. That's not normal. And Anthony Richardson would be another outlier if he suddenly were to come into the NFL and start completing 65% of his passes. That's not been his game. Having said that, he's got this freakish athletic upside that I understand that I think the offense can be reasonably decent, but I don't know that it's going to be any better than it was under Matt Ryan or the weird quarterbacks they threw in last year. So I have a problem with Pittman where he's going. Every time it comes to me in a draft, I can't click the button. I just can't. I just feel like 800 yards is right where he's going to be. And I looked at our Football Guys projections before coming on just to see if I'm way off base there. And that's right where most of them are, 850 to 900. So that just feels like you're going to run him out there every week for a 4 for 51 and just be like, okay, I can't cut him. He's Michael Pittman. And then he just clogs your roster. And so I'm out on Pittman. As far as Taylor's concerned, I haven't found a lot of reason to draft him only because of where he's going. In auction drafts, it's been nice if he ends up in the upper 30s, I'm taking him because that's a nice number. But for Snake, you really have to get him at the beginning of 2, and I'm just not that excited right there at the beginning of 2 for him. I don't think he's going to be terrible. I think his efficiency as a runner is going to go up because of Richardson as a threat. But then I think that could come with the downside of the touchdowns that he might lose. And that really propelled his value a lot 2 years ago when he became the consensus overall was the touchdowns. I don't know that we're going to see 18 touchdowns again. So I'm concerned about the entire offense just taking a step back or being mediocre like they were last year. Just haven't found a lot of reason to draft a lot of them except Anthony Richardson and Superflex.
So keeping that, I know you mentioned like the essential drop-off of QB play and Michael Pittman nowhere to go or nowhere to take that step forward. In a similar, I guess, line of questioning in terms of receivers, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have, 2, arguably 3 elite, great receivers that no longer have Tom Brady throwing the football to them and no longer have, a Jameis Winston who will throw into triple coverage to Mike Evans to him. So where do you expect, or how do you expect the Tom Brady leaving to affect that wide receiver core, and where do you anticipate drafting some of those receivers in fantasy?
Yeah, so I hate to go back to the auction well again, but I'm going to say, a weird thing happens when we sit here and stare at this stuff for 3 months. It's like, okay, well, they're not going to have Brady, so we got to move him down. And then we sit there and we stare at him. We're like, Baker Mayfield, did you see that throw? He sucks. And then, he's down a little bit more. And then, all they got there is Kyle Trask in the back. Okay. And then all of a sudden we're like triple and quadruple counting all these problems. And I feel like it pushes them down too far. Now, right now, Godwin's going as wide receiver 25 and Evans is wide receiver 32. I think that's fairly appropriately priced. Evans is too low, in my opinion, but I wouldn't argue with it. And what I've been saying, like I just said about the Colts offense, was that I get in an auction, and the other night I got Evans for $10. Now, that's fantastic because the other receivers that have his pedigree are $15 to $20. I love that, but I don't see that happening in a Snake. He's not falling far enough for me to care. There's just other guys around him that I feel like have more upside. But I also feel like the hate goes too far on these type of guys where we just keep going bang, bang, bang. And there's really been nothing to say bang, bang 5 times. It's been, okay, he's got these 2 problems, but that's why he is where he is. So I can't argue with the price.
I mean, we've seen DeAndre Hopkins when he had no quarterbacks in Houston. Like, he's still, like, the players are still going to produce if you're at a certain level. So, and like Mike Evans, I think he's 2 years shy of Jerry Rice's record to start a career of 1,000 yards. I mean, that'd be insane. So I kind of like that a lot. But I want to keep with wide receivers for a second. Our listenership is very much Ohio and Pennsylvania, so we have a lot of strong feelings about Ohio State, good or bad. 3 wide receivers in the last 2 years, first round. So I want to play almost like a game with you. Roster, bench, and cut. Of the 3, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, how would you go into this season with those 3?
Just for redraft, not dynasty.
I would, honestly, if you want to give me a little of both, I'd love it. I'm a redraft guy, but I'd like to hear both.
Well, I'm a redraft guy myself, but I will say for dynasty, it completely flips it for me. So I love Smith and Jigba for dynasty. But I don't. So Garrett Wilson's my guy for this year. I'd take him first, Olave second, and Smith and Jigma is just kind of off my draft board because he just isn't falling far enough. And I shouldn't say he's off. Like, of course I'd take him if he fell, but everybody seems to believe that he's going to earn this big role. That could be, but I just don't see Tyler Lockett stepping aside. And on top of that, the Seahawks would just have to change their offensive identity to suddenly be an 11 personnel team. I don't know that they're going to do that. Now, if they do, then he's set up to smash, and then I'm going to look dumb. But I don't know if that's what's going to happen. Pete Carroll loves running the football. They took a running back in the second round because they still want to run the football. So for 23, I'm pretty much out on Smith and Jigba at his price. Love Garrett Wilson. Obviously, he just got nicked up today. That's a bummer. He twisted an ankle today. So assuming he's okay, he's still my number one. Olave, I don't think he's as slam dunk as everyone seems to think. My only concern is what Derek Carr is going to see.
I felt it. You're hurting me. You're hurting me, Drew. I'm in love with I'm a Raiders fan that was like on him. So like
Okay.
I knew that was where it was going to go, but all right, I'm fine. I'm recovered. I'm sorry, Drew. Please continue.
Well, and it's not that I think that the Saints' offense is going to be terrible. I think he's going to be an improvement for the offense. So let me say that. But I don't know that it's necessarily going to be just, hey, automatically, let's give Olave this number one role. Now, if Michael Thomas is healthy and he's playing, I think the two of them are going to be closer than people really want to believe. And the round separation there is massive. So I'm just not ready to buy in Olave as like having this massive breakout year. Having said that, I really like the player, and I'm willing to take the risk for what he showed last year. So I'm fine with where he's going, but Wilson's my guy.
I mean, Olave with putting up those numbers in a rookie year with Andy Dalton, I feel primarily like definitely has to speak volumes. But yeah, Michael Thomas essentially being back. That will almost lead me to this question: who is a player who's overhyped or maybe historically productive that this year you're like, you know what, I'm staying away from? I've made that same mistake the last 4 years on Travis Kelce, so how can I not make that this year?
Well, I'm almost in the same boat with Derrick Henry because I've been fading him now, and I just feel like the player. Everybody says he's different. He's different. I get it. I get the argument. I understand, but he is at that age cliff. He's well past the age cliff and touch cliff. So if he's different, okay, great. Maybe that was last year, but we can't ignore the fact that his efficiency stats went down last year, and his points per game I think dropped by like 3, almost 4 points a game. Even when he was in there. So I'm staying away from Derrick Henry. But that's kind of a layup. There's a lot of people. That's not an interesting opinion. I'm going to pick another guy that maybe will be surprising. I'm not a fan of Devontae Smith for this year. I like the player. I think that Jalen Hurts has room to improve. But if you look at the splits with Smith and Goddard on the field together, it's not pretty for Devontae Smith. So Dallas Goedert got hurt in week 10. From week 11 on, oh no, I had Devontae Smith up here and I dropped it. Oh, here we go. So this makes for great listening. I understand that. So,
Hey, you're
You're
not the first person to do that on here.
So from weeks 11 to 16, he absolutely crushed. You know, he's got a 5 for 102 and a touch. He's got a 5 for 126, an 8 for 113 and 2 touches. This is all with Dallas Goedert out of the lineup. I just feel like we're asking for too much where he's going. He is still the number 2 guy, and sometimes he's the number 3 option in the passing game. Now they add a pass-catching back in DeAndre Swift, and they still have Kenny Gainwell. I'm just concerned about Smith's price tag. It's not the player, it's the price.
So
I like that. Oh, so David, go ahead. My bad.
no, I was just gonna transition a little bit, but so keeping on the same idea of like maybe what people aren't thinking about, what are some of some of your sleeper picks going into the year, picks that you're going to be taking in the later rounds or with your last couple picks in the draft?
So if we're going late, a guy that I was on, I promise you, I've got 10% exposure to Richie James out there in Kansas City. So that may be a little bit high. I'm not comfortable with that. I'd rather have him around 5%. But, you know, he's sitting there in round 22 every time, or round 20. And I'm just like, somebody there is going to do something out of the slot. And it sounds to me like he's the guy who's supposed to do that. I don't know. So Richie James is a guy I'm throwing a dart at. I'm also throwing a dart at Donovan Peoples-Jones because everybody talks about Tillman or they talk about Elijah Moore. But I believe that Peoples-Jones if you look at what he did last year, if they hadn't added Elijah Moore, more people would be talking about Peoples-Jones' profile from last year. He didn't score a lot of touchdowns, but the guy was going out every week and producing. That to me says breakout. I don't know what you want to see if you look at that season and think to yourself, he's not a factor this year. He's not going to step aside. So I don't know. Maybe they're going to run 3 wide, and there's going to be room for Moore and Peoples-Jones. But where I can get Peoples-Jones is just it's a no-brainer. I've been clicking that button probably a little bit too much. But another guy that I'm really on later is Gerald Everett. Again, he was productive last year. I understand they had injuries to the wideouts, but they're really going to push the ball down the field this year. And they've got two guys. Now, they had Jalen Guyton get hurt last year. He's coming back. He's a field stretcher. They got Quentin Johnston now. I think that Gerald Everett's going to make hay in the middle of the field, and I love the new offense. So I think he's going way too cheap at tight end.
I think you earned yourself at least 15 new Browns fans just from mentioning DPJ.
Yeah, like people like the Elijah Moore trade, but now everyone's like, but it's DPJ season. If you ever ask the Cleveland Brown, every single game is about to be the DPJ game. So, no, you may have gained like 20 or 30 just because of that comment. But if you had to put all the chips in the middle of the table here, who is the guy that is making the biggest leap this year that no matter what, I guess outside of a price range, that you're like, I'm going to go up to X amount of dollars and make sure I get this guy because that's how much trust I have in him?
Boy, that's tough because I'm not a guy that drafts really aggressively like that on young players. But I will say that the excitement that the Detroit Lions have for Jahmyr Gibbs is interesting to me. I've never been a guy who says, okay, give me this 199-pound guy who profiles as a 40-catch, running back just because he's got draft capital. But the more I think about it, the more I think that they just had something in DeAndre Swift that they didn't like. There was something about him. I don't know if it was the durability, if he didn't play through little nicks like Dan Campbell wants to eat your kneecaps. Like maybe that he just wasn't the guy for Dan Campbell. And maybe they see Jahmyr Gibbs as the guy. So I that's one guy that I'm picking. I know he's a rookie, but there was another guy that I was looking at earlier that I wanted to mention too. And again, this is great. This is great stuff here that I'm lingering. So Christian Kirk is a guy that I'm planting my flag on him for this year. I understand that Calvin Ridley is a good player, but I really think that Trevor Lawrence is about to explode. So maybe my pick should be Trevor Lawrence. But let's just say I'm all in on the entire Jaguars offense. I think they're all going to take a step forward. And I think that people fading ETN, the guy was so efficient last year with not very many carries. I'm not sure what more you want to see. I know they didn't feed him a bunch of catches, but that's never been his game. So the entire Jaguars offense, I feel like, is ready to just go nuclear this year.
All right, well, I'm going to throw one name at you because we gained all those Browns fans for it. I'm about to take some of them away just because I can. George Pickens. Is he going to blow up the way Pittsburgh media out here seems to feel like he's going to?
No.
All right, never mind. Cleveland loves you.
I'm a Steelers fan, man, and I'm not a Pickens guy. I'm not a Pickett guy either. I don't think that Kenny Pickett is the answer. I think he's a limited quarterback. I'm probably going to get crushed for this, but he only had a 1.9% TD rate last year, so that's really low. That's bizarrely low. That's going to go up. Most quarterbacks that throw as much as he did and the offense scores the number of touchdowns they did, he's going to have a certain percentage of those. Now, when I say the number of touchdowns they did, they were tied for second to last in the NFL in total offensive touchdowns, I believe. And I'm pulling that off the top of my head. I didn't look that up again today, but they were really bad on offense last year. But even so, the opportunity should have been there for Pickett to look a little bit better. As a result, I'm concerned about him overall. I'm concerned that they've got limited play calling ability there. I don't love the offensive coordinator. And there's some guys I listen to in the dynasty community that just think that Pickens is a limited player. Wow. And that all the highlight reel catches just really prove that he can't get separation and that's the only way that he's going to be able to make his living, kind of Mike Williams-esque a little bit. But that's a slander to Mike Williams. I think he's a great player. So I'm not in on Pickens. That's not my guy. So I've got 0%.
I love it.
I love looking that. Bad, but
made my whole week.
I was going to say, the Cleveland fans are going to love it. My Pittsburgh buddies out here might not talk to me anymore, but I'll get through it. Now, the last thing I've got for you, and it'll be quick, just because it is because of what happened earlier today. To those that are listening, next week, we're recording on the 27th. Joe Burrow, 3 or 4 hours ago, goes down in training camp. And I'm going to keep this light. We're fantasy guys. does this not just like, it's like a public service announcement? Why do people draft this time of year? Can you explain to people at home why it's stupid to be drafting in July in the first and second week of August?
For your home leagues, absolutely. I don't know why you'd want to be doing that. But in general, like all these industry leagues and stuff, like I have to, I have a ton of drafts under my. I've got a lot of best ball drafts done, and I've got quite a few more auctions this summer than I've had in the past. The good news is none of them are really like my top level like drafts that I'm super concerned about. So most people don't want to be drafting right now. So my first big time one is going to be King's Classic coming up here the second weekend of August.
Okay.
So hopefully we have made it through the spate of injuries here, the soft tissue stuff that's going to pop up. But the Burrow thing, it's brutal.
Yeah. Thankfully, it sounds like a calf strain. Let's keep our fingers crossed for Cincinnati out there.
We got Joe Burrow, Jalen Ramsey going down with knee surgery that he's going to miss this next 6 to 8 weeks on. Garrett Wilson that you said that was rolling the ankle, so it's tough. And NFL is truly back. We see the cards coming out, and everyone is freaking pulling their hair out right now.
It's brutal. And I was looking at that Dolphins defense the other day. Jalen Ramsey, Xavier Howard, and then they get Vic Fangio. That's going to be nasty. Ramsey, at a position that demands the change of pace and the quickness, the short area quickness, full meniscus repair. He might not be himself till middle of the season. So I don't know. That's a rough one.
And that's what we were talking about. At least they have like a late November bye week too. So if they come back a little bit, then he gets another extra week. That can only be a positive. And he's got that Miami Heat. He's a youngster.
Youngster-ish at corner. Old man.
That is true. Drew, we're going to let you get out of here for the night. Remember, everyone, you can catch Drew Davenport on his podcast, the host of The Auction Brief. Before we do say our farewell, Drew, why don't you? We're gonna give you some time here. Why don't you let our audience know where they can connect with you, they can follow you, or read some of the articles?
Thank you. Yeah, my baby is the Auction Brief podcast. So that's what I started a couple summers ago, and it's a unique show. I know that a lot of people like to say that, but I tried to create something because of this saturated space. So I do legal takes. And we talk a little bit about life and life lessons, things like that. But then we also do some auction stuff. And then I have a guest on every week where we do player analysis. So I try to hit the whole spectrum there. So the Auction Brief can be found anywhere you listen to podcasts. And we don't always just talk auctions. So it's a general fantasy show as well. We do plenty of fantasy analysis. And I like to think we do a little bit more theory on the show than most shows do. So we don't just talk players. We talk, how do we succeed playing the game better than other people too. And then the other thing that I'm really working hard at this summer, I just started a Patreon channel about a month ago, patreon.com/fantasyfootballlawyer. And so I've taken some of my threads to behind the paywall, but it is a massive, massive 12 quarters a month. So, yeah, $3 whole every month. But I just decided that I was spending a ton of time chasing down dockets, writing these threads. I mean, believe it or not, writing a 20-tweet thread, the research that goes into chasing a docket, looking at the statutes, making sure I have the right statutes, the right sentencing statutes, looking at evidence on the internet, all this stuff. A 20-tweet thread can sometimes take me 3 or 4 hours. And so I just said, hey, look, I got to monetize this somehow. It's not going to make me rich, but just, a little bit of money for the time I spend into it. So that's patreon.com/fantasyfootballlawyer. And anytime I have a thought or take on anything legal, it goes right up there. And then there's a ton of interviews with analysts across the industry about their favorite players, auction content, all kinds of stuff over there. And that's about it. My writing's over at footballguys.com, and 4 for 4, I'm doing an article series over there as well. But I think that's it. See me in the expo. If you're coming to the expo, come say hi, please.
There we go. Yeah, and if anyone out there, the LOD listeners, make sure to go listen to Drew if you want to. I know our podcast kind of dumbs you guys down a little bit. Want to get educated, head over to Drew Davenport. But once again, Drew, thank you for your time to come on LOD. It was absolute pleasure to be able to have you on here. Hopefully we can get you back on in the future Until then, take care, and hopefully we get a couple more of those championship belts behind you after this year, right?
Yeah, baby.
Hey, last word. Can you give me a Super Bowl champion this year?
Ooh.
Oh, gosh.
I'm putting you on the spot, Drew.
That is putting me on the spot. Well, I tell you what. I know there's the Super Bowl hangover, but the Eagles look pissed. They look ready to go. I think they felt like they should have won the Super Bowl, and I think they're going to be on a revenge tour. Again, that's a layup, but give me the Eagles.
Love it.
Nothing wrong with that.
Love it.
You're the man, Drew. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you having me.
Thank you, Drew. Once again, awesome interview. Steven, credit to you. You landed a big fish there for us, so we appreciate it. Hope you guys had as much fun as we did. Wait a minute.
Oh God, not this.
Steven, do you
Huh?
what, do you hear that?
The sirens are just so loud, Wally.
They're so loud I can't even hear it. It's 911 rapid fire. And we're going to start because Justin Herbert, the league's most important position, we get a new leader on the leaderboard for highest paid. Justin Herbert signs a new deal, 5-year, $262.5 million. Guys, I just got to be honest. Like, when you saw this coming off of Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson's, were you guys thinking Joey Burrow the same way I was?
How could you not? I mean, I feel like they've been tied together. They came in the league at the same time. And yeah, that story came out where each other were waiting for the other to get paid before they can kind of reset the market. But you guys know how I feel. I'm a huge Justin Herbert lover. He basically broke every stat 3 years in, or first 3 years in the NFL, except for completion percentage, which was led by Joey B, and total touchdowns, which is still held by
Wait,
Dan
from this class.
Marino.
Oh, look at that. I see that.
That's
Wink, wink.
wild. 4 more touchdowns in 6 less games than Justin Herbert. And, oh, yeah, that's really crazy. It is fucking crazy because they didn't throw shit in the 80s and the 90s back then. So, yes, it is crazy that someone almost threw 100 touchdowns in the first 3 years of the league. Also, fun fact. Joe Namath, 70 interceptions in his first 3 years.
Joe Namath, I think he has more interceptions than touchdowns.
I don't care.
For Super Bowl III.
He's an icon for all the wrong for non-NFL reasons.
But the fact that they're both amazing. 98 passing touchdowns in the league that Dan Marino was playing in, that's wild. But also 70 interceptions in the league. In the league that they were playing in, that's dude.
So
Hall of Fame.
My uncle threw more in a game than anyone ever did in that league, but he was still only throwing like 38, 40 times a game. Your quarterbacks now are throwing like 45, 50 times a game.
I mean, how many times have we come on talking about fucking randos throwing 60?
Yeah,
Tom Brady threw 60 last year.
Yeah, like I cannot stress it enough. The 83, 84, 85 were like the greatest showings of a quarterback in history, but neither here nor there. Justin Herbert, it's a great deal for both parties. You know, it'll be a value contract in 2 years.
Yep.
I just, it's expected move. It's a reset of the market for a franchise cornerstone guy. It's the expected move. It's just a great deal for both parties. I think Burrow is going to clear 55 a year. I think he's going to be getting 60. And if you're the how do I want to put this? If you're Burrow, I think I have more leverage against the Bengals than any other quarterback has against their team.
Because be most player against any team.
Because Burrow leaves the Bengals and they're like a 3 or 4 win team for decades, right?
It's
like
Paycor Stadium now because of him.
Right.
Boo.
Like it is. No, it is. It's the Brown needs to find a way to pay this guy $60 million a year because and you want to sign him to like a 10-year deal like Mahomes. You want to get as much value as possible because that's your Super Bowl window with Burrow. And it might not be, it might not be the first year you sign the contract, but the window's open for as long as he's on your team. And the value only gets better if you sign him now for 10 years, $60 million a year.
If you could convince him 10
Yeah.
for $600 million, I think he'd do it tomorrow. Both
Right.
sides would.
Right. And that's your best value for a guy like that. So will the
Look at
Bengals do it?
Mahomes.
Probably not. Right. Like Mahomes is what, the eighth best highest paid quarterback in the NFL right now? Yeah.
And you
Dr.
remember
Joe.
the reaction when he signed
Yeah,
it?
like,
Everybody
guys
here
are-
was like, "Oh, the Chiefs are never going to win again because they paid too much money to Mahomes."
Yeah, no. Like
Pay
he
your
will
quarterback.
Yeah,
He
just
does
pay your
have a
quarterback.
big amount.
Reset that whole market again. Give him 60 per for 10 years. It'll be 80 in 10 years. So like, just sign him now. Keep your window open. But great deal for the Chargers and Herbert overall.
1984 class of quarterbacks had Dan Marino. You know who else it had? It had John Elway. And you know what they wore in 1984? They wore those sexy blue and orange Denver Bronco uniforms. What did they do this week? But we got to see uniform reveals from the Broncos snow caps. Welcome. And to the Kelly Green Eagles, welcome back. What a couple hot uniforms these are. David, I know you're a little lower on the Broncos, but we can all agree these are both hot.
I like the Broncos. I just prefer a different logo on the white helmet. Like I would have preferred.
Did they revamp the logo, or is it the OG logo?
I think it was OG, right?
It's
I thought
OG. I
okay.
just prefer a different Broncos
You like the
logo.
new logo they have now versus this one.
Not even necessarily the newer one. I just prefer. I don't know. I don't like that particular logo. It's not bad. I just on an all white helmet, I prefer less design and I don't know, a much simpler.
Sounds like you're describing that
design.
you like the Browns.
No,
helmets
fuck the
then.
Browns. The Denver jerseys are of the ones
saying.
released are only
Well done,
better
Steven.
than the Browns and the Colts. The Browns and the Colts have the worst New jerseys in the
Colts
history of NFL New jerseys, and
Yeah, fuck New
but the
Jersey.
Eagles Kelly Greens though, I'm gonna have to get myself
my
a Jason
gosh.
Kelsey jersey. Like,
Get me a Landon Dickerson one.
were we
can
talking?
stand
Yeah,
next
were
to
we
each
talking
other.
about this in a text message? Like, I'm
Boys,
gonna
we
end
got
up
it,
buying.
we got it.
I'm gonna
like,
end
we're
up
gonna have
buying
3
6
linemen.
jerseys this year, and 80% of them are gonna be fucking NFL offensive lineman jerseys.
Dude, it's
Yeah.
good, Bert. We got the DH gate.
Except for
You're gonna
that
get the
Baker
orange.
creamsicle.
Baker
You already
creamsicle.
do a Baker creamsicle every time you talk about him. So
Oh, amen.
the kid's on fire. The kid's on fire. No, give me the snow caps with the orange crust jerseys, absolutely, and the Kelly Greens. I mean, chef's kiss. And I might need to get paused on this, but Jalen Hurts in the Kelly Green, that man's looking crispy, and he's also got that.
Are we
old
about
look.
to hit on Jalen Hurts together? Are we going to do that?
Absolutely. Kylie, get down here. She loves her some Jalen Hurts. But no, you got Jalen Hurts is kind of like that old soul, right? But then he's got that old school look. He's got the fro, the hoop earring. I'm like, dude, you are built
A
for the Kelly
good-looking cat.
Greens.
80s cat all the
He
way
is a
to it.
good looking, and you throw the Kelly Greens on there. I'm not usually a quarterback jersey guy, but sheesh, that number 1 Kelly Green, Jalen Hurts,
It's hot.
it's hot.
Tell you what, there's going to be quite a few players that could buy Jalen Hurts Kelly Green jerseys now because we've had a few contract extensions this week. The Giants and Andrew Thomas, 5-year, $117.5 million. Say what you will about David Gettleman. That one's looking better by the day. Seahawks extend Uchenna and Nwosu for 3 years, $59 million. Yeah, I drilled it. 3-year, $59 million deal. Cowboys, they give a 5-year, $97 million deal to Trayvon Diggs. And the Texans and Titus Howard, 3-year, $56 million deal. And the last one, the Bears, and their tight end that looks more like a left tackle, Cole Kmet, 4 years, $50 million deal. So I just spat a lot of news at you guys there. But what do we think of these deals? Do you have a favorite in there?
I think they're all great signings for all the respective teams. There's nothing in there that I think is utterly shocking. However, I could see the Trayvon Diggs contract coming back to bite the Cowboys in the ass. I think he's an average to above average corner with great ball hawking skills. But his 11 interceptions is never going to happen again. It's just not going to be held consistent. If it is, I'll be totally wrong on this. That'll be a value contract for sure, worth it. But it's not going to happen again. you're paying elite money to a above average guy who's going to get you 5 turnovers this year, but give up 1,000,000 yards and 1,000,000 receptions to a top receiver. It's. I think we talked about it a little last year with Trayvon Diggs, but he's just not. He's not a great corner. He's just a good corner with great ball hawking skills, and I don't think that contract is going to be worth it over time. But I could be very wrong.
Now, honestly, if you look at it, because I'm with you on that, David, and I think everyone's here on the same page about Trey Diggs. Like, I'm not a huge Trey Diggs guy. He's going to get his flowers this year because now they have Stephon Gilmore on the opposite side that they brought into Dallas. So I think a little of that pressure is going to be taken off, and now he can play his true game, which he has been, which is ball hawk, but I'm also going to be a liability. I mean, that game against the Patriots 2 years ago where he has a pick six and the next play Kendrick Bourne takes it to the house on 75 yards on him, that epitomizes his whole career. But no, I'm not a fan of it, but then when you look at the contract and where he's at, it was going to be the 5th highest paid. I agree with everybody that's above him except for Marlon Humphrey because I know how bad of a year he had last year. But you got Jaw that's sitting at first, Jaw Alexander. Denzel Ward is right behind him. Jalen Ramsey. And then it's whoever I just said. I already blanked on his name. And then you have Trey Diggs. Like, there's not that many people that are below him. Maybe Marshawn Lattimore, but also coming off a huge injury here for the Saints. So I think maybe over time, I don't think it's a good contract for the Cowboys. Over time, it's going to be a good contract for the Cowboys in a sense they're not overpaying him. But I just don't think it's good for the Cowboys. I don't think he's that good of a player. I think that he's overpriced and overhyped. And yeah, everyone's like, well, look what he did. He transitioned from wide receiver to cornerback in college. Okay, cool. He's a freak athlete. That's what the NFL's filled with. Like, am I supposed to make an exception to this? So I don't like it. Shout out to Andrew Thomas, though. Not a great rookie year. Okay, 2021, but 2022, he has his best pass blocking grade by PFF, just basically 90. Second team All Pro, allowed 7 sacks and quarterback hits combined last year, which is wild, especially with how bad that Giants O line was last year, with just like sparks of being good. Only for him to allow that, that's good. Because I also think about the Dallas Cowboys having like 30 pressures against them in that first game.
So glad you brought him up because he deserves it, especially given that you and I were very critical of him a couple of years ago, and he's definitely turned around and he deserves all the praise he gets. The only thing I'd say is that I'm going to play almost devil's advocate because I agree, but someone has to, with Trey Diggs being the guy that getting paid all this. It's probably too much, but I tell you that there are people out there that are celebrating this. The one that came to my mind right away was rookie cornerback Emmanuel Forbes from Mississippi State. He's had a monster camp with Washington right now. And who knows, you can call them whatever team they are. There's so many rumors about what they're going to be called in the future. But he was such a boomer bust guy himself in Mississippi State. Listen to this. He had 6 of his 14 interceptions in school went back for a pick six, most in college football history. And 14 was the most at that time in all of NCAA football. Guy is like Trayvon Diggs, where he's going to be all in, all out. So be excited. Keep your eye open in Washington because that's a fun little dynamic there. But I mentioned that he's a camp hero. With camp heroes, you get camp injuries. And unfortunately, this last week, we had a very good example of one where it didn't turn out as bad as we thought. And we had one that was devastating. We'll start with positives. Joe Burrow and the Bengals, very lucky that we're talking about that in rapid fire because this would have been the lead story had that been an Achilles. Instead, it was a calf strain. Bengals dodge a bullet here. Broncos, on the other hand, Tim Patrick regrettably ruptures his Achilles right after his ACL tear, and I know all three of us feel gutted for him. What are your guys' thoughts on these two injuries?
Well, Joe Burrow's fine. I don't think he's had a full training camp since he's come into the league, and it doesn't really seem to affect him. From what I've been kind of reading and seeing, is that he'd be fine really getting into camp after like 2 weeks. But it's like, what's the point? We know what you are. We know what this offense is. We didn't really move a lot of pieces. We didn't move head coaches. So it's like the offense system is really going to be changing that much. So I get it. For Tim Patrick, like my heart just breaks for a kid like this. Like this is somebody who he's going to be 30 this year, and every single year it just feels like this is going to be the Tim Patrick year. If it's the second year, maybe this is it. Breaks his hand, he's missing 8 games. Or if it's last year, okay, now we can get him in a new offense. We saw glimmers of him in Fangio's team. Tears his ACL. Oh, this is finally the year. Cortland Sutton's getting a lot of eyes on him. We know what Jerry Jeudy is. One of those 2 guys are out. This can be his year. Achilles rupture. So it's just heartbreaking. A guy who's, like I said, turning 30 in November. It just, for me at least, it just seems like this guy's done.
Honestly, so talking about the Tim Patrick news, like 2 years ago, this guy was getting a lot of hype. You know, it looked like he was going to be a significant piece of the Russell Wilson era, and then he gets hurt, and now he's coming back, and he's kind of getting some chemistry with Russell Wilson again in camp, and it looks like again like he might be the favorite target, and now Achilles tear, and you know what Steve said, I just, it kills me inside because I just want to see this guy play football and I want to see him do well. And I think he had the talent and he probably still does, but it's just going to look a lot different coming off of 2 significant leg injuries. It's just tough to see. It's one reason to almost hate camp because you're getting all these non-contact injuries or these fluke injuries that take away players that are either crucial to a team's wins or players that you were really hoping to see break out this year. It's just tough to see those. As far as Burrow goes, you know, I was a little surprised at myself when the best quarterback in the division went down, and I was like upset about it instead of secretly happy. The Bengals are lucky as hell because, you know, if he goes down with another ACL, contract talks look different. You start to wonder if the window's a little shorter.
You're talking about him the same way with Tim Patrick, where it's like,
right,
it's not
it
there.
It just looks different, right? It just looks different, right? And you know that 60 million, 600 million 10-year deal we were just talking about. If he tears his ACL or tears his Achilles this year, and he's got 2 significant injuries in 3 years. You start to wonder whether you should give him 10 years or whether you should give him the 5-year Herbert deal and whatnot. And don't get me wrong, I think Burrow's phenomenal, but it's weird how these things.
It makes it
right,
hard.
right. You start because you got, as a franchise, you got to think about long term, and the injuries in the short term hurt that image, right? Even you could be 100% positive Burrow's coming back because he's a pocket quarterback. You'd be 100% sure he's coming back. He's coming back strong. Whatever, but it hurts. It fogs that long-term image. So it's just tough to see. And the Bengals got real lucky with Burrow, but it's tough to see guys like Tim Patrick go down because you know the potential was there, and excuse me, he's probably never going to get like the hype and the shot that he was going to get 2 years ago ever again.
Moving on to, I guess it's not even fun to talk about, but it's definitely at least not an injury. The Cowboys and guard Zach Martin. Their tension between the two sides is growing by the day. If Jonathan Taylor and Jim Irsay is our biggest rivalry right now in camps, this has to be number 2 between Zach Martin and Jerry Jones. $50,000 non-waivable. I preface that again, non-waivable fine for every day he misses camp. And then he's set to already make $14 million. For quick math people at home, that's 20 days is $1 million off of that deal right now. That is 8th among guards as it sits. Martin is a 6-time All-Pro, including 2 straight first teams. So I am at a very difficult spot with this, and I'm sure you guys were looking at it and feeling the same way. How do you feel about Jerry Jones and Zach Martin having this little head-off against one another?
Hold on, what? Head-off?
I don't know what to call it.
Face-off?
Face-off. That's so much better than a head-off.
Head-to-head or face-off? You got 2. You took 2.
I'm going to lean into it now. It's a head-off.
But somebody here needs to explain to me the aspect of the simulation we're living in, where the Cowboys are always in a position where they need to sign somebody to a $100 million contract. It's like 4 consecutive years where they're signing guys to like $100 million extensions, and I don't get it. They've been in cap hell forever. I don't understand where all this comes from. But as far as Martin goes, I mean, he's just in a position where his contract, it became a value deal for guards. Like you're great. You're getting paid like a great guard. I don't think he's worth resetting the market on right now, but he's absolutely definitively a necessity to keep around the Cowboys organization. So it puts them in a stupid, impossible spot. And if you look at PFF, he's ranked as like the 19th best guard in the NFL. He's coming off an All-Pro. I get it, but how old is he? I don't even like. He's
33,
what 30,
33,
33?
34.
32.
32.
Okay.
So how much longer are we getting elite guard status from him? And I understand offensive linemen can go until they're like 38 or 39. I just, is he worth resetting the market on? Probably not. Probably not. But I'd say his contract is pretty damn fair for how good he is. Maybe you increase it to 16 or 17, and who knows? Maybe that is top guard money. But like maybe you make him like the 4th highest paid guard. I wouldn't reset the market with him. But you got to keep him around. So who knows? I don't think he has any position to bargain, to be honest. Like you said, well, he's losing money.
Spot.
Right. You have to show up and you have to play, and if they don't pay you, they don't pay you. But like if you don't show up, you're doing yourself a disservice, and you're not going to get what you want anyways. So you might as well go to Jerry and be like, look, I'm getting 14 now. I'd like 16 per, and I'd be happy, right? Like I don't know. Both sides have to come together and make what's the word I'm looking for?
Well, I mean, you should broach your
Compromise.
piece.
Yeah, compromise. Both have to compromise. So I don't know. Those are just my thoughts.
Just what a great problem in life to live, where I'm not getting paid enough with my $14 million. I need more. But I can argue that Zach Martin has more traction against this front office than Jonathan Taylor does. Like, look how bad the Dallas O-line has been over the last couple of years, and it just keeps getting worse because you're losing your Zach Martins. Who am I thinking that just went to La'el Collins? We all know that he kind of dipped down a little bit.
Well, don't forget Tyron Smith got hurt last year. You had Jason Peters
Jason
playing.
Peters was filling in. So it's like, what this offensive line is. But at the same time, it's also difficult. Like, you just saw Trey Diggs get paid. There's your $100 million contract for the year. So check the box, David. And then you also need money. What if Dak has a decent year? People in Dallas are going to be clamoring to get him back somehow. You got Micah Parsons that's going to need to get a contract here soon. What if Tony Pollard balls out, and now you're kind of in a pickle here that maybe you got to start paying this running back, because he isn't just a running back. He can play in the receiving game. We saw what he was last year. So like all of a sudden you have all these players that are going to need a contract. And yeah, I get it. It's kind of that double-edged sword that you need to pay a lineman, because that's what is going to bolster offensive line that is deteriorating by the game, it feels like, for Dallas. You need to at least hold on to something that you can hang your hat on in that front five. But man, I don't know. Whatever makes Dallas miserable, I guess. Even though I have them pretty high in my preseason rankings, I guess when we get into it, I can still enjoy them being miserable.
That's where welcome, by the way, again, where your joy in a season is dependent on another base's misery and being upset. So I welcome you, Steven, on that regard.
Oh yeah.
But
Thank you for having me.
Of course, yeah, anytime. But David, you mentioned that he was the 19th guard rated in PFF, and this is just another one of those examples of that constant debate between PFF and others in their evaluation process. Because, I mean, Martin, again, 2 straight All-Pro seasons, and yeah, maybe he's getting a little too much respect because of what he did when he was younger. But, I mean, he's part of the reason why that team has been as special as they are. But what sucks for him is that he will be 34 when his deal is up, and you can tag him at a guard salary, no problem, and you get 3 straight years with him. So he'd be 35. So I get where the Cowboys are coming from. It just sucks. I get where Martin understands, hey, if I am elite, I probably have a year or two left of getting paid. So I hope him well. I just don't expect it to go well.
Well, like the first person I thought of, and I was kind of off by the age, but Trent Williams, right? Sending, or I guess they're the same age, right? He left when he was 32. Trent Williams from Washington when he came over to.
The only difference is I would argue that it's harder for a tackle to stay relevant that long. Where guards, you can play until you're 38, 39 usually if you need to. If you're good enough, the guys like Zach Martin play till they're 38.
Yeah, which I agree with, but my point is like, okay, you're gonna let go Trent Williams, who's put a decade into your team, and all of a sudden he just goes, and you're like, wow, he is arguably
really
better than I remember when he was in Washington, right?
Bengals and Andrew Whitworth.
Bengals and Andrew Whitworth, right? So it's one of these things that a lot of these offensive linemen, they think their time is up, or that team does, and all of a sudden they go to a different team and they can continue balling for a 4, 5, 6 year period. So that's got to be sitting in the back of your mind, because if you let him go, yeah, you have Tyron Smith, like you said, but then what? Like I just remember when they were drafting all these offensive linemen, and like back then I was like, what the fuck are these guys doing? But that line that they had was phenomenal, and all of a sudden it's just dwindling down to nothing now.
I mean, if they had any defense at all, if you even give them half the defense they have now, they probably would have won a Super Bowl about 5, 6 years ago.
But they didn't, so who cares?
Nope. See ya.
And with that, that's going to bring us to an end of another episode of Loss of Down. Make sure to comment, like, and subscribe to our Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Loss of Down. And, of course, retweet on our Twitter, _loss. Shout out to our sponsor, Abby Turner Creative, AbbyTurnerPhotos.com, ABBEY, Instagram, Sawdad and Sapphire. Again, shout out to Drew Davenport popping on for the interview. Appreciate it. Cannot wait to get him here on again. Boys, any parting words for the people?
He will be back. But, David, go ahead. Feel free to give us your parting words here.
I got nothing, boys. I'm excited to see how people feel about the Davenport interview. I'm excited for the feedback.
And he will be back on again. Remember, Steven, it's the Auction Brief podcast, I believe.
You got it. You know what I'm upset? He doesn't use enough gavel in there. The gavel
You need to. Next time we have him on, we have to ask him about that. That's got to be a big thing for him. Come on.
We need more gavels.
Speaking of gavels, though, next week, guys, we're going to have a little bit of a debate. We're going to need a gavel. We're going to need a judge. And there's a really good chance our Stephen Weed might be that guy. Because if you've listened to this pod long enough, you would realize that David wants every person, including a concession stand merchant, to be put into the Hall of Fame, where I want good players getting put in the Hall of Fame.
This fucking guy.
And next week we are going to introduce the Hall Monitor, which might be Steven to start us off, where we're going to argue over a few players, given it's Hall of Fame week, over the possibility of them getting in the future. Again, I think you're going to know who's on whose side, because, and everybody gets it.
Buddy, God, you're on the wrong side of history for not all, but a lot.
I'm looking up Hall Monitor.
Give me a gavel price. Sash badge, and give me the damn gavel, Steven. That's all I ask. I asked for so little.
I need to get a whistle.
Yeah, just have a bunch of random things just ready for us. We'll be good.
Where's your hall passes?
That being said, until next week, Matt Schaub's a Hall of Famer.
Get fucked.